2 decades ago this month, photos of smiling US soldiers posing with humiliated detainees at Iraq's Abu Ghraib prison caused worldwide shock. And after years of legal battles, the lawsuit brought by 3 prisoners finally began on Monday. John Hendren has more from Alexandria in Virginia. A warning, though, viewers may find some images in his report distressing.
The Abu Ghraib pictures tell a sordid tale of torture. Prisoners stacked naked in a pyramid, handcuffed on the ground, dragged by a leash, and attached to electrical wires. A soldier giving a thumbs up next to a corpse. Now, 20 years after the release of those photos of the U.S.-run prison at Abu Ghraib in Iraq set off global outrage, 3 survivors are getting their day in court.
It was Abu Ghraib and the revelations of what was happening in Abu Ghraib that opened the eyes of the United States and the world to a shift away from the law and treatment of those in custody in the name of the war on terror.
The survivors are suing CACI, the Virginia-based military contractor that supplied the interrogators who worked at the prison. Justice has been long delayed. This case has been bouncing around the court since 2008. CACI has tried to have it dismissed around 20 times. In 2021, the U.S. Supreme Court sent it back here to district court, where it will finally go on trial. The company denies wrongdoing and says its employees have not directly inflicted abuse on the prisoners. But the plaintiffs in the case say the company set the conditions that resulted in torture by ordering military police to, quote, soften up detainees for interrogations.
There's been no accountability really for what happened at Abu Ghraib and beyond. I think a case of just one person is tremendously significant.
Among those expected to testify, Army General Antonio Taguba, who led an investigation into the Abu Ghraib scandal, and former Staff Sergeant Ivan Frederick, sentenced to more than 8 years in prison for inflicting abuse. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Alexandria, Virginia.
Well, let's now speak to Sarah Sanbar. She's the Iraq researcher at Human Rights Watch. She joins us now from Soleimania. Sarah, why has it taken this long, 20 years?
It's long overdue. It's in part taken this long because CACI has filed 20 motions to dismiss the case, trying to claim that as a military contractor, it benefits from the same immunity that the U.S. government does for the actions of its troops overseas.
You've spoken to these men, I believe, Sarah. They've told you about what they were put through. Can you perhaps share a little about how it's affected them over these years?
Yeah, I think by now the stories are very well known. But unfortunately, in these cases, once the story leaves headlines, people forget. And the men that I spoke to suffer almost daily reminders in the form of physical scars, injuries left over, as well as the mental scars from trauma that they continue to battle with, and PTSD.
Sarah, they've obviously waited so long. How do you see this case playing out? How soon, for instance, could we get a ruling? What sort of outcome or responsibility might something like that entail?
The Center for Constitutional Rights, who filed the case, is hoping and expecting that the case will be wrapped up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. They're suing for damages, and we're hoping that this is going to be the first case where a court has ordered a military contractor to pay financial compensation to people as a result of its actions. We're really hopeful that this is going to set the precedent not only for further cases similar to it, but to hold the U.S. government itself accountable, because to this day, they haven't paid any compensation. There's no pathways available where survivors can raise their claims and have their cases even heard.
You mentioned that the military contractor was arguing on the basis that they have immunity, like the armed services do. Do you see any accountability in future for the U.S. armed services?
I mean, unfortunately, it seems like courts aren't going to be the avenue where we're going to find that accountability. Human Rights Watch, in addition to many other NGOs, are fighting to make sure, one, that this doesn't ever happen again by advocating for changes to policies to prevent torture happening in the future, while also being mindful that redress needs to be provided to people that did suffer torture, whether that redress gets provided through the courts or through the administration, which is looking like the more likely option at this point. It needs to be done.
Sarah, you talk about changing policy. I mean, it felt like the Abu Ghraib revelations were this huge shock to the world when those photographs came out. But torture by militaries remains a practice. How much did what happened in Iraq, how much did that actually change things? How widespread is torture as a practice around the world now?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, unfortunately, it continues to happen. The legacy, not only of the torture, but of the impunity for torture, the fact that we haven't seen any accountability has emboldened others to feel that they can torture and face no consequences themselves. So even though some policies did change in the wake of the 2004 scandal, there's still a very long way to go before torture is a thing that we can say is finally of the past in our world.
Sarah Sanbar there, the Iraq researcher at Human Rights Watch, speaking to us from Sulaymaniyah. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah, and we do hope that something happens with this case sometime soon.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.